Okay, probably the best known verse in the entire Torah and the entire Bible is an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. It's always quoted as an example of biblical morality, particularly in the news sometimes when they talk about what's happening in Israel. So they say that there, according to biblical morality, there's always eye for an eye, tooth for tooth. Whenever one side attacks, the other side attacks back. As if that this is based on biblical ideas, that eye for an eye, tooth for tooth means that if you poke my eye out, I will poke yours back. If you knock out my tooth, I'll knock out your tooth. And this is also often quoted as an example of the harshness, cruelty, inhumaneness of biblical morality. That what good does it do if you poke my eye out, but I poke yours back out? What type of justice is that? And it seems like, and again, like an example of an old-fashioned, archaic way of looking at things, as opposed to our much more modern, sophisticated way of justice, where we don't just take revenge. But the truth is that eye for an eye, tooth for tooth has never ever been taken literally by the Jewish people. We've never understood this as being literally an eye is poked out, you poke their eye out. In fact, and no Jewish court has ever poked an eye out in punishment for somebody knocking somebody else's eye out. That's never been the way it's done. It's always been understood as being financial compensation, monetary compensation. If somebody knocks somebody's eye out, so then you have to compensate them for an eye. You have to pay them back their eye. Just by the way, how would you work out how to compensate somebody's eye?
Two different ways.
Because
compensation,
embarrassment. You spell I in. You take
the eye.
The next.
Yeah.
No, Tachasai.
Right.
It equals kesef.
Right. Correct. We'll look at that one. But how would you calculate the monetary value of an eye? What's an eye?
How much a guide
How
dog
much a
costs?
slave would be worth in the market with the eye, and then how much would be worth without it, and then you take
Correct.
that amount.
Correct. So in other words, we're not paying back for the actual value of an eye. An eye is infinite value. We're paying back for the piece of flesh that is an eye.
Yeah.
And so that's worked out on the slave market, as was done back then. People had bought slaves, as we've discussed in other classes. And so what would a slave be worth with his eye, and what would his be worth without his eye? And then you got the value of an eye. That was one of the ways they worked it out. But anyway, we have never understood it as being literal. Now what I want to do is show why. Why have we not taken this in the literal sense? If the Torah says an eye for an eye, how can you then say, well, it means money? It doesn't mean money, it says eye. An eye for an eye means an eye for an eye. How can you say that means the value of an eye? And if it does mean that, why didn't it say that?
And how do you know when to take something
Right,
literally?
well, yeah. How do you know when to take it literally, when to take it out of its literal context and metaphorically? If you start taking things metaphorically, so then everything can be metaphorical. You can say when it says thou shalt not steal, it doesn't really mean not steal. You can steal if you want, just symbolically you can't steal. What does it mean? So I'll just share with you some of what the Talmud says about this. First of all, the Talmud questions, let's say we would take it literally, eye for an eye. How could you possibly make that fair? It would never be fair to take one person's eye out because they took another person's eye out. Why not? First of all, no two eyes are equal. If, let's say, a very young man poked out the eye of a very old man, so are their eyes of the equal value?
Yeah.
What if one of them is short-sighted and the other one has 20/20 vision? So are those two eyes equal? No. What if one of them is blind in one eye and you poked out the good eye or the bad eye? So the one good eye is worth much more than a normal eye. The one bad eye is worth nothing, almost. So no two eyes are equal, depending on their eyesight, depending on their ability, depending on the other eye. You can't say that taking one eye out would be a commensurate punishment for somebody else's eye. They're never in sync. It would never be fair. So that's first of all. Our reading of the verse, we have to ask. We're not talking about anything barbaric. We're just talking about the fairness of it. Even if it wouldn't be barbaric, would it ever be fair to take one person's eye out in punishment for them taking another person's eye out? It never could be equal. No two eyes are equal. So it already doesn't make sense. Second of all, how would you do it? how would we practically do this if, let's say, the law was you take somebody's eye out for poking an eye out? How would you take their eye out? What would you do? Put them under anaesthetic and remove their eye?
Gently.
Do it gently? Do you lie them down, give them a local or anaesthetic, and then remove their eye? That's not how they remove the guy's eye. If they poke somebody's eye out in a fight, it wasn't done medically. It wasn't done in a clinical way. You punched him and knocked his eye out, or you took a stick or whatever it was, in a painful way. You can't then lie him down on a medical bed and remove his eye surgically. That's not fair.
So now that with transplants, it's probably possible to take it literally. We can transplant.
No,
your
because
eye.
that would. Oh, you mean give him the eye?
Yeah, give him your eye.
Okay, that could be interesting.
Spleen for a spleen.
Right. If you did it violently, if let's say, okay, he poked the guy's eye out in a fight, so we're going to poke it out violently. How do you know you're going to do it the same way as he did it? You could kill him. It could be much worse. It's practically impossible to enact this literally in a way that would be fair. It just doesn't make any sense. So already reading the verse, we already know that it doesn't make any sense to take it literally. But more than that, that wouldn't be enough. If just it would be difficult, okay, but if the Torah says, it says. How can we take it out of its literal understanding? We have to put it into context. Every verse in the Torah is not looked at in isolation, it's looked at as a part of a whole. So if this verse is contradicted by other verses, so then we need to reconcile those contradictions. So looking at this in context, we find in the general gist of the way the Torah approaches punishments, it doesn't make sense to take it literally. It must be talking about monetary compensation. Why? First of all, source number 2 here is a verse from the book of Numbers that says, "Do not take ransom for the soul of a murderer who is found worthy of death. You should rather put him to death." This is one of the verses that says that a murderer has to be put to death, and it says, "Do not take ransom," meaning don't take payment. If somebody's been found guilty of murder, so then they're put to death according to the way of the ancient Israelite courts, and you should not take ransom, meaning don't take money as a payment from the murderer. They need the death penalty. Why is the Torah telling you that in the first place? Because there are other cases where you do take money. Some cases you take money, but not for a murderer. If the person injured another person, then you take money as a ransom, it's compensation. But a murderer not. And so this verse indicates that by telling you not to take ransom from a murderer, that other cases you do take ransom.
Mm-hmm.
When you injure a person, when it's not murder. Okay, that's not enough.
But wouldn't it be saying the same thing as eye for an eye? You killed someone else, now you're going to take his life.
Well, yeah, there the Torah says clearly that somebody who murders gets the death penalty. There it's clear and it's said many times, and we don't take that out of literal. But this one we do. Number 3 says it even more explicitly. There's a clear statement of the Torah that injury means you have to pay damages. When men fight and one hits the other with a stone or a fist, he must compensate him for missing work and pay his medical bills. Compensation. So we see the Torah says clearly that you have to pay money for an injury. So not injure him back. You don't just hit the guy back. You take money. So the Torah is pretty clear that you do pay. You have to pay. So if that's the case, now we've got a contradiction. One verse says an eye for an eye, implying if you poke someone's eye out, you get your eye poked out. Another verse says if you hurt somebody, you have to pay them money. So which is it? You can't get 2 punishments for one crime. So is it monetary payment, or do we physically punish you? So to reconcile that, here's a third verse that shows that they're actually not a contradiction. Number 4, what does this verse say? One who kills an animal must pay it back, a soul for a soul. What does that mean?
Give a live animal to someone for.
You have to pay it back. Pay means money. It doesn't say you have to replace. It says you have to pay it back.
Yeah.
Paying means you have to pay back the value of the animal. And then it says a soul for a soul. What does a soul for a soul mean? How would you understand that?
How much you pay for a live animal?
So that's not how you would originally understand it. What if it said this? If you kill somebody else's animal, a soul for a soul. What would that sound like?
Kill one of your own animals.
Yeah, yeah. You get one killed back. or one of your animals has to be given. So, like you lose or something, you gain. It sounds like animal for animal, but it says one who kills an animal must pay it back. What does that sound like? Money. So what must it mean? This reveals to us that in biblical language, a soul for a soul doesn't mean what we think it means. It doesn't mean that because you killed a soul, so your animal soul will be killed. It means that what you killed, you're going to have to replace the value of it, the value of a soul, the value of an animal. And that's clear. There's no other way to explain that verse. What the very same verse says, pay it back, a soul for a soul. So the money you're paying back is the value of the soul that you're paying for the soul. So therefore it's not a contradiction. When it says eye for an eye, it means money. Just like it says when you injure somebody, you have to pay them their missing work and their medical bills. It's only money. It's not a contradiction. That's all fine as far as our verse, eye for an eye. But here's another verse that throws a bit of a spanner in the works. Number 5 says, when a person causes a blemish in his fellow, as he did, so should be done to him. What does that imply?
Physically damaging.
You've got to hurt him back. As he did, so it should be done to him. Okay, eye for an eye, we've explained that it means the value of an eye for an eye. But this says, as he did, so should be done to him. When you've injured somebody, as you've done, so should be done to him. You've got to hit him. You've got to hit him what he did. So how are we going to explain that one? How can we interpret that possibly as meaning monetary payment? So again...
What's the context for the one when men fight, he must compensate? What's that context? Like, is that possible?
It's in Mishpatim, it's talking about interpersonal laws. And
the eye for an eye as well?
Yep.
It's also in...
Yep.
Just a few...
Yeah. A little bit later.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's all in cases of damages, people damaging other people's property or person. So while we've eye for an eye, we've explained it means the value of an eye, but how are you going to explain as he did, so should be done to him? That sounds very blatantly clear. You have to do to him what he did. So again, we have to look into biblical context. The language used by the Torah is not always the same as the way we would use it, and here's another example where the very same phrase is used, but it means something very, very clear. Number 6 is in a story in the book of Judges. Samson, the great warrior and hero, when his wife was kidnapped. And so he went and burnt the produce, the farm produce of the perpetrators, of the people who kidnapped his wife. And he said this, as they did to me, so I did to them. What does he mean?
Stolen?
Livelihood?
Huh?
Livelihood?
Some embarrassment, damages, some sort of damages.
What did they do to him? Kidnapped his wife. What did he do to them? Burnt their fields, their granaries. There's a bit of a difference between a wife and a granary, and kidnapping and burning. It's not the same thing. He didn't do the same thing. So what does he mean? As they did to me, so I did to them. It means in a general sense, they hurt me, they inflicted something on me by kidnapping my wife, so I got them back, and I burnt their granaries. We're not here defending what he did, if it was right or wrong, we're just talking about the grammar of it, the wording. That when it says, as he did, as they did, so I did, it doesn't mean the same thing. It means just as they've hurt me, so I've hurt them back. Just as they have afflicted me with something, I've afflicted them back. So too in the verse before, in number 5, when a person causes a blemish in his fellow, as he did, so should be done to him. Doesn't mean the same thing he did should be done to him. It means just like he has hurt somebody else, so too we have to punish him. He has to pay money, not physical punishment. He has to pay money. That's his loss. As he did so, in English we would think that means exactly the same thing. No, it doesn't. In biblical language it means just like he did something, something has to be done to him, but not necessarily the same thing. So it doesn't necessarily mean doing the exact same thing to him. It means he has to incur, as if, similar to that. So he incurs a loss. Or there's another example of this, just to show that this is not a one-off example. Number 7 is a verse from Zechariah, the prophet Zechariah, who says, "God has punished us just as we have done to him." What does that mean? What have we done to be punished? We've sinned. What has God done to us? He's made us suffer for our sins. It's not the same thing. Sinning and suffering are not the same thing. But just as we have, so he has.
It's like a reaction.
Yeah, so it means we've done something wrong, so too he has done to us, and we've suffered. So it doesn't mean the same thing, it means a parallel. You've done it, so you get it. So here as well, when it says, when you cause a blemish in his fellow, as he has done, so it should be done to him, it means punishment. Financial punishment, money, nothing physical. So you mentioned earlier that a hint of this is actually in the word itself, because at the end of the day, it says an eye for an eye. So in the Hebrew, actually, it doesn't say an eye for an eye. It says ayin tachat ayin. Ayin under an eye. So one way of interpreting this is a hint in the verse, is that the word tachat means underneath. So if you take the word for eye in Hebrew, which is ayin, spelled the letters ayin, yud, nun, the letters that are tachat, that are beneath those three letters in the alphabet. After ayin, you get pei. After yud, you get chaf. After nun, you get samach. So those three letters, chaf, samach, pei, spell the word kesef, which means money. So there's a hint in the verse that ayin, tachat ayin. If somebody pokes out an eye, so then that which is beneath the eye in the alphabet, which is kesef, money, is what's paid back. That's a hint. But the bottom line is, the Torah could have said, kesef tachas ayin, that you give money for an eye. It could have said it straight, blatant, clear, and that's it. Why does it have to hint at it? And then we have to work it out by going around the entire Tanakh to find, just tell us what it means. Why is it being vague? So Maimonides, Rambam, gives a very interesting reason why. In number 9, he says, when the Torah says, as he has made a blemish, so should be done to him, it doesn't mean to say that you should actually injure him as he did to his fellow. Rather, that he deserves to lose his limb, or be injured, as he did himself. Therefore, he must pay compensation. What does it mean?
That a person can ransom, if it's not murder, if it's an injury, they can ransom what should be done to them. They can trade that for money.
Right. So in other words, we're not going to ever poke his eye out. We're not going to do. But he should know that that's really what he deserves. Just like a murderer who has taken away an innocent life does not deserve their life anymore, and they get the death penalty. So too, somebody who has taken away somebody's eyesight, or somebody's leg, or God forbid any other part of the body, what do they deserve? They don't deserve to walk around with two eyes when they've taken out this guy's eye. However, we're not going to take out his eye, because that's not going to be fair. There's no way to make that level and just. So the only way we can do it is by punishing him by paying a financial penalty. But he should know that he's getting off lightly. He's actually getting off lightly because he deserves his eye to be poked out. So the Torah says it in what he deserves, eye for an eye. But hints at the fact that really you're getting away with paying. You don't actually have to lose your eye. And this is in order that when he does tshuva, when he repents for what he's done, he should realize it's not just I've broken somebody's window and I have to pay back for the window. When you take somebody's eye, even after you've paid back, you actually can never pay it back. There's no money in the world that can possibly pay for a limb. So he should realize that he's getting off lightly, and therefore take it much more seriously what he's done.
Is this intentional and unintentional?
Yeah, because it says about a person is always responsible for their actions, even if it's an accident. You're always responsible. Unlike an animal and other examples, you're always responsible. So Maimonides says he has to realize how serious it is what he did. On a deeper level, you could explain it like this: the written Torah says eye for an eye. The oral Torah, the Talmud, comes and explains it doesn't really mean an eye for an eye, it means paying money. In Chassidus and Kabbalah it says that the written Torah is like a father and the oral Torah like a mother. Why? Because the written Torah gives very brief information, which the oral Torah expands and explains. Just like a mother and a father in producing a child. The father gives a very little, brief contribution to the reproductive process. The mother then develops that seed into a fully blown being, a viable living being. So the written Torah gives a seed, gives a little verse, a little hint, which the oral Torah then expands upon and explains and makes it into a halacha, into a law. So the written Torah says eye for an eye. The oral Torah comes along and explains, not really, it actually means money, and based on all the logic that we just explained. It's like parents disciplining a child, where the father says, "This is what you deserve. A child has misbehaved. Get out of the house. You deserve to be out on the street." The mother explains, "Your father didn't mean to kick you out on the street. He meant that what you've done is bad enough to be kicked out on the street. Really, you're just going to have to go to your room and wait there for a while, and then you'll be okay." So the written Torah says it like it is. You deserve your eye to be poked out. The oral Torah, the mother comes along and softens it, doesn't change the law, but says what the Torah really meant is you deserve your eye to be poked out. But it's not going to happen. You're not actually going to have your eye poked out. You're going to have to pay money, but you should know how bad it was, what you did. You should know how serious it was to take somebody's eye out. That's a deeper level. Another even deeper interpretation on the back is from one of the Kabbalists known as the Rekanti. The Rekanti was a Kabbalist in Sfas, in Israel, and around the 16th century, and he was he's written a very interesting interpretation of the Torah, a mystical interpretation. So this is what he says about it. Ein tachas ein. When it says an eye for an eye, kvar yudua ki ze hapasuk amar Rabbi Seinu Zal she'enu kipshutoi ela lamammon. We know that the Talmud has explained to us that this verse should not be taken literally. It rather means you pay a financial penalty. Gam pasuk kasha yitamum ba'adam ken yinosen boy. So to the other verse we quoted, as if you put a blemish in a person, so too should be done to you. Hakavanu by lamammon. It also means money. Davar nitam miyad liyad, something that you pay. So ken yinosen boy, it should be given to him. Given him means to give money, not to inflict any physical punishment. V'chen v'katzoi says kappa. Also another verse where it says you should cut her hand off. We're talking about a woman who injured somebody, that you should cut her hand off. It doesn't mean you cut her hand off at all. No, we don't cut hands off. It's financial penalty. V'chein ba'al of yumas. So too when it says that a person who owns an ox, and the ox kills a person, so then the owner should die. He doesn't die. If your ox kills another person, you don't get the death penalty. You have to pay damages. So several times we see that the Torah says a statement where the punishment sounds much harder than what we really do. It's not taken literally. It's a monetary punishment. So you might ask a question. Since the Torah does not mean what it's saying literally, why is it written in such a way that non-believers can come and make fun and say, look, your Torah says eye for an eye? Why doesn't it say it's clearly that it's not an eye for an eye? Why does it say it in that way? But the answer is this. What our sages have taught us, Shivim Panim LaTorah, there are 70 facets to the Torah, 70 ways of interpreting every word in the Torah. The simple and literal explanation of every mitzvah is found in the oral Torah, and that's what we follow. But nevertheless, even though there's a simple and straight interpretation of the verse, which means paying money for damages, that is the simple level, but the verse itself has other meanings and other messages in it. And those other meanings, deeper meanings, would not have been understood if the Torah would have expressed itself in any other way. For example, when the Torah says an eye beneath an eye, literally, an eye beneath an eye. So, what this means according to Kabbalah, according to the mystical interpretation, that a person who injures another person has to pay him 5 different payments of damages, health bills. He has to pay him the embarrassment he's caused him, the pain he's caused him, and the loss of work. So there are 5 payments he has to pay. But it was written in such a way that doesn't look like a payment. It says eye beneath an eye to tell us a very deep secret. This is something he's explained elsewhere. The shape of the human body corresponds to the divine reality. We are created in God's image, and therefore every detail of the human body is actually an image of a divine reality, a divine emanation. Not that, God forbid, God has a body. God does not have a physical body. Our body is a physical emanation, is a physical version of a spiritual truth that is God. And every limb of our body is our version of something divine. That's what ayin tachas ayin means an eye beneath an eye. Meaning our eye, the physical eye that we have, is beneath the spiritual eye of God. And our teeth and our leg and every limb in our body is beneath, is the physical down here version of a reality up there. Every part of our body is that way. So when you live a life of morality, when you use your limbs for holiness, so then your body is a direct reflection of a divine reality, meaning you're an expression of holiness. You're using your limbs for their right purpose, and so therefore your body is in line with the divine reflection that it is. And when you do a mitzvah with your limbs, you draw down energy from the divine body that you reflect. And so when your hand reaches out to give tzedakah, and when your eyes and your brain are used to read and to learn Torah, so all of your limbs are being used in the right way. So that draws down divine energy to that limb from its spiritual source. So ayin tachas ayin. Your eye is beneath the eye above, because your eye is looking at holy things and doing the right thing. And your arm is doing the correct thing, and your legs are running to do a mitzvah. So when your limbs are doing the right thing, they are reflecting their divine source. That's what eye beneath an eye means. And the opposite is also true. When you utilize your limbs for something negative, so then you misappropriate the energy that comes down to you and then bring it into unholiness. That's what it means. When you put a blemish in a man, so too should be given to you. Meaning, when you blemish the divine reality by misusing your body, so then the blemish comes down to you, and you have a negative patch on your soul. And understand this very well. So if it would have said money, it's kesef tachas ayin, that you have to give money in the place of an eye, we never would have learnt this Kabbalistic idea. It wouldn't be hinted at in this verse. It would have told us the halacha, the law, very clearly, but it wouldn't have given us any more meaning. So by the wording being unclear to us, that we needed to interpret it, it also opened it up for other explanations. The Gam Rabbeinu Saadia Gaon Zal Kosav B'Sefer Emunos, the great sage Reb Saadia Gaon, he writes in his book called Emunos V'Deis, V'ilu Dibra Torah Kol Inyana B'Lashon Kalelis V'Kavana Achas. If the Torah would have said everything clearly and explicitly, exactly what it meant, we would have not been able to learn any secrets, any deeper meanings. It just would have spelled out what it means. It would have just had one clear meaning, but that's all, no more than that. There's many levels of wisdom that the Torah wants to teach us, even though it's not explicit. Because every word in Torah has its revealed level and its hidden level, its superficial interpretation and its deeper interpretation. As it says in Book of Tehillim, that Hashem said one thing, but I could hear two things from it. Every word of Torah is said once, but has many different interpretations. So this principle actually can be used in many things, that so many times the Torah says something and needs to be explained and interpreted, and why didn't it just say what it meant? Because if it said what it meant, it would have limited itself to that meaning. By saying something that's a bit vague, it can have many meanings, and all of them are true on all different levels. So here as well, an eye for an eye, definitely never meant to be taken literally. It doesn't mean you poke anybody's eye out. We never did that. It means paying money. That you pay money for damages. So why didn't it say that? Because then we would have missed the deeper lesson, and that is that your eye down here is a parallel to the eye up there. Where you use your eyes for holiness, so then you are in line with the divine source where you came from, and that brings down blessing.